Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today is September 9th, if I'm correct. And this is another of our bi-weekly SIG CLI calls. My name is Matthew and I'll be your host today. So our agenda is pretty light today, but I think I want to cover a couple topics. So first of all, it's announcements. The 120 release dates are official. I linked the full schedule if you're curious. The most important dates are at the top, which is code freeze is in the middle of November, November 12th to be precise, and the enhancements freeze, which basically means when you need to have your Kubernetes enhancements proposal merged is October 6th. So that's one thing. Phil, Sean, do you have anything to add with regards to the announcements?
No, I don't.
Okay, so
Nope.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Oh no, I was just saying that I think my sound doesn't work very well with this web version of Zoom. I'm gonna have to get the
Yeah,
next client.
it is chopped a little bit, just like it was last time when I was telling you that one.
I'll work on that.
The app works okay on Linux as well. I'm running Fedora, it works fine. The main topic that I wanted to bring to you is it was brought up into discussion, and you probably noticed emails on Kubernetes dev at the beginning of the release, and we're still kind of in the stabilization phase, which basically means only the chairs and tech leads for all the SIGs have to put a milestone explicitly on PRs to be able to merge stuff. The reason for that was to slower the rate of incoming PRs and ensure the stability. The biggest issue that we had at the end of 119 was that the queue was very flaky. There was a lot of test failures and so forth. And there are discussions about making 120 stabilization release, although the majority of people claims that it's a little bit too late to be announced a stabilization release because pretty much everyone had their plans already laid out in front of them. So this is more of an ask towards the SIG leads to be mindful about their area. And I linked here both the test grid for SIG CLI and a flake tracker. I'll probably link also what I was talking about last time is a document from Jordan about deflaking the queue. And generally the ask is to ensure that your area, in our case, kubectl related tests, are not affecting the queue significantly, and ensure that we have sufficient coverage in the tests for that. I remember, and I still owe Brian reviews because he looked at the test grid. There are several issues related, and I'm so deep in everything that I need to do that I still owe him a couple reviews on that one. But I'm hoping probably sometime next or the following week, I should have my my backlog cleaned up a little bit to be able to go through these. So that's pretty much all that I wanted to bring up to the SIG. If anyone have any topics that they want to talk with the group, now is your chance. Or if you're a new person that hasn't joined, I'm looking at the attendees list, and I think I recognize majority of the names, but I might be wrong. So if you're new, feel free to speak up, introduce yourself, tell a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Maybe I can give small intro about myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Yeah. Myself, Dinesh, working in ThoughtWorks. So I have been using Kubernetes around 1.5 to 2 years, and been with DevOps for around 2 years. And I was also trying to contribute to Kubernetes. So yeah, that is pretty much.
Okay, welcome. Do you have any particular area within SIG CLI, whether that will be kubectl or sub-projects that we are sponsoring that you're particularly interested in?
I mean, I was looking into some issue. Then I thought I can do some contribution on the kubectl.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I have raised a pull request for that particular issue. It's kind of in progress. I mean, I got one approval, but I am not very sure why it is. I mean, maybe we have to add milestone or something so that it can get merged. So I
Yeah,
thought
it
I
might
can
be
get
so.
some clarity.
Yeah.
So if we have time, maybe at the end of the call, we can quickly check that pull request.
Leave me the number of the pull request in the Slack. That'll be probably the easiest for me to track it. I'm the guy that announced that there's a 60 line in 5 minutes. Okay, so welcome again. I'll have a look. I'll definitely have a look at your PR. If it's a bug fix, then definitely that's something that we can merge right away.
Sure. Cool. So should I ping you in Slack?
Yeah.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Is there anyone new other than Dinesh?
Hey all, I'm Yuvraj. I'm from VMware. I've been involved with Kubernetes for a few months now, and I was just like looking at all the SIGs and attending a few meetings to see how the community works and how the work gets distributed and how just getting to know people involved in the community itself.
Now I'm getting off the thing, but if you're listening to it, then I might as well be again.
Okay, welcome. Bailey, you were saying something?
Oh, sorry about that.
I wasn't sure because I was super quiet and I wasn't sure whether you wanted to say something or I was unrelated. Okay, cool. Welcome. Do you have any particular area after your initial overview that you'll be interested in, or particular feature, a bug, or a particular work within kubectl or SIG CLI browser that you're interested in?
I'm sorry, are you asking me or Bailey?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
In 6 CLI, kubectl seems to be interesting. Like the last topic I was following was the server-side apply, and that seemed like something interesting. I want to see if there is any pending work there or if there is any help needed as far as server-side apply goes.
Okay. I'll definitely encourage both of you, the new person, to join the bug scrub. I can't remember off the top of my head when we have the next one, but probably sometime around 20th something. Let me quickly go through calendar and checking the dates, unless Eddie will help me out. And
I think it's next week.
Is it
It's on
already next
16th.
week? Yeah,
It is on
16.
16th.
16. So it's in next week, exactly. Man, the time flies so fast. Okay, so welcome and definitely join the call next week. We are usually going through the bugs, PRs, and issues. There is a chance to pick up some of the stuff that is in the queue for 6 CLI and kubectl.
Sure.
Is there anyone else new?
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, welcome again. Okay, I'm hearing none. Eddie, you have a topic. Go ahead.
If you scroll up, there's a couple issues on there. The first one we actually should talk about today. The others can wait till next week if we don't have time. But Yao pinged me right before the call. He's not able to make it because it's midnight for him.
Yeah.
But this one Antoine brought up. It's been open for a bit. He suggested we need a formal discussion on this change. I don't have any other context besides that.
Would need to have to specifically the PR. I know that Yao pinged me as well some time ago, but like I said, I'm not sure if that's a particular one.
No, it's the same one. He said he didn't get an answer from you, so he pinged me. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. That's good. You know, that means he's persistent. Right, because we at some point in time there was no option to pick which option the deletion works, and over time we introduced options to, at least in the API, how you want to progress with deleting, and that includes foreground, which basically means you throw the delete operation to the server and the server will handle everything. Background, other way around. Foreground, you're waiting basically for the entire delete process to happen. Background, it happens on the server and you can pull the server. And orphaning basically means that a server-side process which is responsible for tracking all the children of your process. For example, a deployment creates a set of pods. When you delete deployments, it also by default removes all the pods. Orphaning means I just want to remove the deployment, but the pods should be left behind for whatever reason. And if you invoke the API, you have the option to pick one of the three. And kubectl does not have that option. I think there are only two, because you can add wait, which basically means we do the foreground deletion. And this change, I'll definitely have a look at the PR, and then we can decide whether, if this is a user-facing change, a significant one, we might want to have a cap, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm not saying one way or the other, and I'll sync with Antoine with regard to that one as well. So yeah, it's definitely something that I would need to check. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I have just a little bit of context on that. So yeah, as you, I think you mentioned before, there's only a Boolean now for whether we cascade on delete, and it's going to be modified to be a string. So it is actually kind of an API change in that it's changing the flag. It's so it is relatively significant in that regard.
Okay, I'll definitely make sure to have a closer look at it, and I'll sync with Sean and Antoine and figure out where we want to continue from here. We still have lots of time, so we can definitely check the remaining ones.
So the TLDR with this one, I believe this person is working on Scaffold at Google, and they realized that when you do a port forward, it picks the oldest pod instead of the newest pod. So if you do a rolling deployment or a new pod is being created, it won't grab the latest changed pod. It'll instead grab the oldest pod that doesn't have your newest changes. And he kind of laid out how all of that actually works. And so his proposal is to flip that logic so we grab the newest pod when port forwarding instead of the oldest.
I personally don't have any particular objections one way or the other. I'm pretty sure that we do some sorting, and I would have to check how the sorting works. We probably would have to figure it out whether, because that particular mechanism is then being used for getting locks if you don't specify a particular container and pod and there's more than one. For exec, I think the same, and pretty much every command that allows you to specify a higher level workload controller, and it will automatically try to figure out which pod to take, might rely on that behavior. I would have to look at the particular details why we came up with this and not the other way approach. But at the same time, I don't have any strong opinions yet, one way or the other.
Is this just a capability they need, or do they want the default to be this for some reason? Because if it's just something they need that isn't currently supported, we could safely add like a flag that enabled some control over the the preference for which pod is attached to or forwarded to rather.
Yeah.
And
That's basically what I was thinking, that we would leave the default as is and then eventually expose the control through flags, and the only question is then how to expose it in a most straightforward way, because it's a little bit more complicated, I guess.
It could be as easy as a favor newer flag, since the default is favor older.
I mean, the question is more about their particular use case is for having newer, but then if you look at it from a broader picture, it's only a matter of time when someone shows up with, oh, I want to have that particular pod over newer, and then we would be coming up with yet another mechanism and yet another flag and something like that. So I'd rather have some kind of a more generic mechanism for picking this rather than just newer and ad hoc solving this issue. So yeah, I'll leave my thoughts. It's definitely a feature request that we can look into. I'll definitely leave some comments. Okay, add field selector option for kubectl top pod. I wonder if, I think there were some changes with regards to kubectl top pod. I can't remember if the entire backing mechanism is being removed or something like that.
I had a PR out for top pod for sorting. It had to do with sorting, I think.
Does your PR switch it to use the builder, resource builder thing? Because currently it's not right now. I looked into this a little bit. It's just looks like we need to use the builder, and it's kind of using old logic instead.
If that is that simple, then I don't see any objections. That, I mean, yeah, if it's, yeah, you can definitely leave that kind of comment, Eddie, there. If that's only missing the builder, then I'm full support for adding the builder there, and it should be pretty straightforward. And we will get the field selector for free, basically. And the token file flag. I wonder if there was a PR trying to add the token file. I remember that I was looking at something like that, but I don't remember the outcome of that PR. Someone was literally mapping all of the options that the client Go has over to the kubectl, including token file. But I'll dig through it and find where we what was the answer then. It might be that I was not too super in favor of having all the possibilities. It's a little bit different with the client Go, and given that there are so many alternatives, like you pointed out, Eddie, in the issue, I'm not super happy about having like a gazillions of flag, because that only complicates stuff.
Yeah, my take from previous conversations, especially with Ahmed, he seemed pretty strong about this. When there is a simple bash alternative to something, we'd prefer people to use bash instead of adding more features and code for us to maintain.
Yeah, definitely.
But this is going to keep popping up. This CI/CD has popped up a few times, one with the base64 encoded token. So I think we're eventually going to have to talk about an actual supported use case for this.
Or we can put it in the FAQ, which I haven't read, and I'm sorry. I was hoping to do it before the meeting, but I totally run out of time with my kids and everything else.
This could be part of the kubectl doc the thing. Yeah, well, there's, I think, like the kubectl, like the rebase on Hugo, that Siam is doing as part of the season of docs. We're like the kubectl book is being rebased on Hugo, and then the plan is to fold the customizing kubectl content into a single site. So that site, like as part of that, we could try and figure out where is the right place for this sort of stuff, and maybe it's a matter of it just not being surfaced at the right particular location.
I mean, this is the type of a feature, all the feature requests and everything like that. We were talking about it to put it in the FAQ, which would be living inside of the kubectl repo. And the premise was that we would have a template when people will be opening features that would point them to this flag stating, if you're trying to open issues that are related to one of the questions that we have over there, make sure that it is covered there. And if it's covered, don't open, because there's 99% chance that we will close it. So that was the goal when Eddie started writing this fact.
Yeah, no, I think I remember that now. That makes a lot of sense. I think I was thinking, like, if there's like a bunch of if the answer for a lot of these issues is use this set of bash commands instead, we might want to just add a page of like, here's all the different bash commands that we've recommended in the past.
Are you sure you want to have you want to put together all the bash? That reminds me. That reminds me, Ahmed's he has a script that generates aliases for all the commands as a shortcuts. So you can have very efficient commands through very simplistic commands. So instead of writing entire kubectl get pods with a namespace or whatever, you can type KGP, and there's so many more combination in Ahmed solution. So that's pretty neat. But the downside is that your bash RC grows significantly, and I'm worried if we would come up with all the possibilities that people come up with for injecting, I don't know, files and whatnot, I might grow our documentation more than the actual content that we would want to care about.
This one specifically is where I get stuck, and I get that we want people to use bash, but like this functionality already lives in client Go, and all we would need to do is wrap this with the flag and use the client Go logic. So this is hard, right? Like this is where it gets hard. And I like I said, I honestly think that we're going to see CI/CD stuff pop up way more because people are starting to adopt it more. So eventually we're going to have to make an actual decision on supporting CI/CD use cases here.
Yeah, I'm not objecting. But then again,
also, this person works on Tecton, and I bet they can implement this feature if we tell them it's okay. So there's that.
So here's the thing, because when you embed kubectl in the cluster, and he specifically speaks about an in-cluster use case because he's injecting var run secrets Kubernetes IO service account token. When you inject kubectl in your cluster and you don't specify any flags for configuration or anything like that, the default mode, and probably a lot of people are not aware of it, is as the first thing, kubectl will look for in-cluster configuration, which means that there's, and I probably don't remember, but there's an environment variable for kubectl master service and port. And along that, it will look for the token, and it will use the in-cluster service account to connect to the local cluster you are currently running in. So it's only a matter of injecting a proper service account into your pod and then invoking the kubectl commands like you would normally do, and it will pick the right in-cluster configuration. You can easily verify that by bumping the verbosity level to, I think at 2 we are printing which configuration we are picking. And you will notice as one of the first elements that it will say that it is using in-cluster configuration. That basically means we found the 2 environment variables, and we are picking the service account token against your cluster. So that will solve the majority of the CI/CD cases unless somebody is trying to do something different and it's not injecting the certs the way that we initially thought of. So I'll write it down in this particular case and ask if that will serve his particular case, because maybe that's exactly what he's missing, because I'm worried that this is the feature that is not that well documented.
I'm not sure if, I don't think this would show the actual token now that I think about it, because that should be interpreted at the shell level. And unless the shell expands the whole command, which I don't think it does, I don't think the token would be visible.
It should not. I mean, I would not expect this to be, but I'm not 100% sure. Honestly, I would have to give it a try locally,
Okay.
but I don't think Bash does.
One other quick question. There's a --kubectl flag to point to a specific kubectl, and within the kubectl, you could have a token. Is that correct?
Yeah, but the problem with a kubectl is that you would have to have a valid kubectl, which basically means you can't just use a token, but you would have to be able to inject and
Okay.
yeah. The token, at least the one that he's pointing to, it's a row token. And with the kubeconfig, you need to fit into the kubeconfig structure. That would be the difference.
Yeah.
Not sure if we talked about 93188. Oh, this one. Sai wants to talk about the local. It's not quite local across all the commands. What about it, Sai? I was recently talking about it with my coworkers.
So I was thinking that we could make a struct of common options and then populate them in the complete function call. And then all the different subcommands would use this particular function to populate the common struct fields. And then if any specific two subcommands are there, they can do that after the function call. And then basically we don't have to duplicate a lot of code in all the subcommands. I am not sure if this is optimal.
I think you left that kind of a comment.
Yeah, like I talked in Slack about that, not in this.
Okay. I would like to see this in action. So if you could sketch up a proof of concept PR, and then we can look at it during one of our next SIG CLI calls. I think it's a reasonable approach, probably the simplest one that we could come up with. Maybe this could be part of the CLI runtime, like other similar elements that we are currently injecting into every kubectl command.
Yeah, I will try that. I will do that.
Cool. Eddie, you were looking at, is there anything else that we wanted to talk? Okay.
Those are the three that I needed some input on.
Okay. Stand-ups. Do people have topics? And I'm looking at Crew, Kui, and Customize that I want to share with the group.
I just a quick question. I was actually curious what our story was with Katacoda. I noticed that we have on the documentation page, we have a separate section of documentation versus tutorials. I was curious, like, is the plan for tutorials is it sort of more fixed and the documentation will be evolving? Who owns the tutorials? Do we own them? Does Katacoda own them? What's the story there?
We own those. I think those were developed about in Kubernetes 1.2 effectively. So a number of years back, as part of the probably second version of the Kubernetes docs. They were developed by a company that we contracted with. I think we paid them to develop those, and we spent some time co-developing or like giving feedback and helping directing those. And I don't think they've really been changed much since. So we are free to change those. We are free to do effectively anything we want with them, as long as we do it, with SIG docs or it's us and SIG docs own those collectively, right?
And like in terms of just the SIG CLI, like for example, customized, is there any desire, forget even about intent, is there any desire to, you've mentioned, some of the transition from the Git books to Hugo. Is there any desire or perceived need to work on the Katacoda side, or is it already foreseen that the Hugo solution will be more than good enough?
I think the Hugo will probably be good. I mean, if we had more like a pool of folks wanting to improve stuff, I think there's areas I could direct folks to. I wouldn't pick Katacoda as my first choice. Like, I think Katacoda is a great experience for, I'm coming to the website and I want to have successfully run something in a way that feels like it's running on Kubernetes, right? And then that's pretty much what you get out of that. Yeah. Is like, I ran a pod, you know what I mean? And I can do that again. I think that's a critical point in the user's journey, but it only lasts maybe an hour, right? And then I don't envision anyone ever going back to that page after that hour is done.
Yeah. It's not really a great transition out of that world into real world.
Right. Like there's part of the reason the Katacoda 2, right, is because like with Kubernetes, it's like, okay, first you have to get a cluster. And when that stuff was actually written, like I'm not even sure Minikube existed, and definitely not like Docker on desktop Kubernetes or Kind or any of these other things. So, but I'd say it's a combination of, as the rest of the system has matured, there's probably less need for bootstrapping folks with a sort of clustery thing. But also that I don't think it scales to learning about the APIs, for instance, right? So like, okay, like what do you do after that? It's like, well, I need to learn about deployments, I need to learn about services, and I need to learn about config maps. And at that point in time, I think it's fair to tell someone like, go download Minikube, or like go download something and get your own cluster, because like you're not going to be wanting to do all this in this browser.
Yep. Yeah, I guess the thing that occurred to me as I was reading through, I was trying to do a compare and contrast of all these different forms of docs we have out there. And it does seem like a lot of the more recent docs we've written are very good, but they're written sort of in that kind of tutorial kind of style. They have execute this command, you'll see this output. Here's an example output file. They kind of have that notebook kind of structure, but they're written as static documentation, which that seems pretty effective. I just was curious as whether that was an intentional choice to do that in the world of HTML rather than Katacoda. Just curious.
Yeah, Katacoda, we have not changed those to my knowledge since they've been written like so many years back. I think Katacoda may do like we may upgrade the Kubernetes version and do some of that stuff, like some very fine, like some very focused sort of changes to those, but we haven't really changed the content. I think it's costly to change that content.
Oh, really?
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Like it's costly from an engineering perspective, right? Like I can write in a markdown file. If something takes me an hour to do, right, to put the doc together, like paste input output, I think it's fine. Like that I could do. Learning Katacoda, it's like, how do I even test this thing and how do I push it? And I think it requires like maybe the cat, like we have to upload binaries or these sorts, or maybe not binaries. We have to upload the whatever the scripts are that kind of describe how the Katacoda systems run, and have those pushed by the Katacoda people. I don't think there's like a run this locally sort of experience.
Makes sense. Okay, this is very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, we've been working on a few things sort of separately for different use cases, but it occurred to me as we were working through that there might be some intersection with some of this. So, and maybe on next week's call, it's a little premature now, but maybe next time's call I can give you some demos of some of the stuff we've been thinking about. The intersection.
Yeah.
I'll leave it vague there for now because things will change over the next 2 weeks, but I think we'll be ready to share some stuff in 2 weeks' time.
I think my thoughts on docs are like the two places where you get the most return on your investment is one is like simple reference and guides. Like you want your reference to be really good because that's what people I think are going to be spending. That's where people are going to spend the most time over the course of their like experience working with your product.
Plus,
Like
it's indexed,
okay,
like it's indexed by the web crawlers and all that. It's easy to find.
exactly, it's easy to find, it's easy to look up, and like usually like the progression is like the Katacoda type thing, like entry. Then you kicked out of that quickly, and then you move on to guides, and the guides teach you some different things, and then you do those. Then you've kind of learned basically how you want to do the thing in the guide, and then now the long where you spend the majority of time after that is, okay, like does the thing that the guide showed me support this feature, right? How do I find that out? And that's where like you start going into the reference documentation and seeing like how are all the different ways I can use this concept I learned about. So really just like having pretty thorough reference documentation, which we don't have as much as I'd like now, but we're working on. Then the guides after that, which just make sure that those route to the right reference documentation and provide the right concepts and context for all the information in the reference so that you can make that transition without being frustrated and have the right mental model. And then actually the biggest one that we don't do, but like people consistently tell me is critically important, is the in-command documentation.
Yeah. Interesting.
There also important factor is that if the docs is a simple MD file, then I can fix if there's a typo, there's an error or anything like that. If it's a simple MD file, then I'm gonna clone the repo, fix it within 30 seconds and submit a PR. Versus if it's a Katacoda, then I'll probably just won't. Yeah. Which greatly improves the overall quality of the docs, because the entry barrier for fixing a text document is super simple.
Yep.
So, you know, new contributors and all the people, everyone, like literally everyone reading the doc can open a PR on GitHub and fix that one particularly. You don't have to even clone, if I remember correctly, because GitHub has nice webflow to open a PR and fix ad hoc stuff.
That's a great point. Yeah. So in the Hugo, just one last question on the Hugo work. I'm definitely a Hugo newbie here, but as far as I can tell from Hugo, you have the option of either giving it straight up HTML or giving it Markdown, and it can kind of mix and match. Is the goal for SIAMs and the work for the summer of docs, is that the goal to be purely Markdown, speaking to Maciej's point, or is there going to be some lingering HTML, raw HTML?
The goal is, so currently it's in Markdown. It's in a Markdown with the Git book format. It's being migrated to Markdown in the Hugo format. I think the big difference there is sort of how how a particular markdown file may be rendered. You may want to change the formatting slightly. That's not really a big one. There's a number of plugins both support.
Yep.
They support, like, here's how you draw a graph in one versus the other. So there's not a lot of those in the content. I think there's very few actually, but those have to be migrated. It's not a big portion of the work. The real big chunk of the work is going to be basically fall into two categories. One is restructuring the Git book to factor guides and reference separately. Right now, they're kind of mixed together. I think it was an interesting experiment. It's written as kind of a book format, and books tend to mix. Like, if you look at the in-action books, they progress without having separate referencing guides. But looking at kind of the doc sites, my experience since then has been that having those separate actually is very valuable. People expect to have a strong reference section. So it's splitting the content there. And then the second piece is the kind of the order things were written, right, is there's a bunch of documentation on the kubectl website, on the CNCF, or on the K8s CNCF website that is intermingled with all sorts of other stuff about K8s, right? Because anytime you're teaching anything to someone about Kubernetes, you kind of use kubectl to demonstrate that, right? So that's all. There's a bunch of documentation there. Plus, there's documentation that was written early on for kubectl. There's the stuff in the book that was kind of an attempt to reorganize a lot of the stuff that was either omitted from the website, the Kubernetes website, or just not well structured, and bring in the customize content, because when that was written, like, customize was hitting a point where it needed to be introduced to kubectl, I think. And so it was an attempt to bring those two together. And then the third thing you have is you got the customized docs, which exist as markdown files in the typical Git approach, with it's just a bunch of like MD files that aren't rendered. You don't have any platform for using them. And that content spans old, new, but it hasn't really been strongly organized. So what I took a stab at 3 months ago was taking the customized docs and just putting them in a Hugo-like thing and reorganizing them, putting sections, classifying things as either being guides or reference or examples. And then I took a stab at writing like an actual reference section for customized. Before, it was mostly just examples of customization files in guides. But there wasn't like a great, here's every field in the customization YAML and what it does, an example of using that field. So I took a stab at that, and it was mostly taking existing content with a little bit of writing more, put it in the Hugo site. You can go look at the customized site now. Maybe whoever's presenting could bring it up. And so the more difficult of the tasks, but I think is going to pay off, is in addition to breaking the kubectl book into guides and reference, also at the same time integrating it with the customized guides and reference. So the customized site now has guides and reference. And if you look at what's if you just look at the content in the Git book for kubectl and the content of the customized guides and reference, there's a lot of overlap there now, because different sites got developed at different times, but you couldn't really omit, like, it wasn't, you wouldn't have a good experience omitting that content when they were on different sites, right? Because it'd be going back and forth between different sites. But now with the sites being integrated, you can kind of dedupe and say, okay, let's just create a good reference section on generating config maps and secrets. And then in the guides, we won't talk about as much of all the config map and secret generating options and what they are. We'll simply just give a thinner example of doing it once.
Okay, makes sense. This is great. Very helpful. Thank you.
I want to throw out there real quick. I don't know if it's true anymore because Katacoda is now owned by O'Reilly, but Ben Hall, the creator of Katacoda, was super helpful in regards to implementing things with it. Okay. Kubernetes is actually one of their featured courses that they use in sales demos and stuff. So if there's anything we want like tweaked on that stuff, I'm sure we can reach out to Ben and see if he can get some resources to help with that.
Oh, nice. Thanks, Eddie. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to make sure. Thank you, Eddie. Like, our experience with Katacoda has been very good. From perspective, Ben's been very helpful, and it works as advertised.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to develop an interactive experience, I feel positively about our experience working with them.
That's good to know. Great. Okay, thanks everyone. This is very helpful.
Okay, thanks. We have 5 minutes still left. Stand-ups, does any of the sub-projects want to share with folks?
So maybe in 2 weeks we can actually we'll be able to share a little more. We're right in the middle of something, so yeah.
I can take 30 seconds and talk about Customize.
Yeah, definitely.
Primarily, it's an appeal for some help. Let me throw something in the chat here. We're pretty short-staffed, so the goals are to get Customize reintegrated in kubectl for the next release of kubectl, which is coming up rapidly. So we're focusing on that and focusing on stability, fixing the bugs that are being reported by super users like Haley, really well documented bugs that we can fix quickly. But the focus is on reintegration with kubectl. So if anybody's got some bandwidth for help, it would be appreciated.
Yeah, I put that in. I put the link in the agenda as well.
I should actually have some time for this iteration. We've been in crunch working on our first GA, and unfortunately we're having to pin to 3.61 of Customize for that. But yeah, definitely our goal is to get back on the latest.
Thanks, Bailey. That would be great.
I want to bring this up at probably the Contribex meeting, but Hacktoberfest is next month. And if we tag some issues with Hacktoberfest, we'll get magical contributions because the Hacktoberfest website surfaces all the issues tagged. So that might be something to bring up at SIG Contribex, but I feel like we get a lot of help there if we tag some issues.
We can definitely...
What is Hacktoberfest?
I will drop you a link. It's an open source online hackathon, and contributors make 4 or 5 pull requests in the month of October and they get a free t-shirt. It's run by GitHub and DigitalOcean. It's been going on for like 6 or 7 years now. And I think last year we had, last year when I still worked there, we had like 80,000 contributors like work on projects and get t-shirts. So there's some cool stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely worthy. I was about to say it would be nice to tag some of the issues from Kubernetes and kubectl when we will be going through them next week during SIG CLI bug scrub. At least getting, I don't know, some number reasonable for people to work on.
I'll pitch Contribex and see if we can get the tag added to Prow, and we'll see if we can give it a shot.
Cool, cool. Okay, I think that's pretty much all. Thank you very much for today. A reminder, we have a bug scrub next week. So I'm hoping to see you next Wednesday. Thank you very much again, and have an amazing rest of your day. Bye.
Say Mache, just upgraded to the Linux client. Does this sound any better?
Oh, it does. It definitely, the sound, there's a huge difference. You sound clean and everything. So yeah, it works perfectly.
Great. Yeah, it looks like I was using the microphone from the webcam instead of this microphone I have right here. So I got the Linux client and I got this set up. So cool. Thanks.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. Take care.
Yeah. Take care.